Hi, good morning everyone. I am Benji Yorpo and I'm from BSEd Science 2A. And I'm currently studying at Eastern Visayas State University or Moc City campus. And today I am going to report the case 1 or the study 1, where the title is Where did the first Catholic Mass happen in the Philippines? But before that, let us define what is perspectivity. So what is perspectivity? Perspectivity is a characteristic of narration or representation where more than one perspective is presented to the audience. It is referred to the epistemological idea that the history is interpretation and subjective with multiple coexisting narratives about particular historical events. It is also a way of looking at historical events, personalities, development, culture, and society from different perspectives. So, this means that there is a multitude of ways by which we can view the world, and each could be equally valid and at the same time equally partial as well. So exploring multi-perspective in history requires incorporating source materials that reflect different views of an event in history. Because singular historical narratives do not provide for space to inquire and investigate. So different sources that encounter each other may create space for more investigation and research, while providing more evidence for most or for those truths that those sources agree on. So, there is always room for conflict and controversies in a study of the Philippine history, where there is space for conflict and controversies, primarily because, number one, historians would be subjective in their interpretation. So, their interpretations might be based on their educational background, might be based on their personal interpretation or artifacts. Of course, we have understood that artifacts couldn't speak for themselves. So those who interpreted that artifacts or a particular historical topic might be based on their interpretation. So there are also perspective in history, multi-perspective in history. There's a lot of perspective when it's the study of history. That is why there is always a room for conflict. There's be always a space for controversies. In the study of history, and some historians call this one past but many histories. And of course, there are many history because there could be many interpretations based on the perspective of historians. So today we're gonna discuss about a particular topic that is very interesting and controversies happened in the Philippine history. So in this topic, we're gonna discuss about the first Catholic Mass happened in the Philippines, and this is now the conflict or controversies, where it is the first Catholic Mass happened in the Philippines, either in Limasawa Island in Leyte or in the Masao in Butuan. So in the year 1998, the National Historical Institute declared that Limasawa Island in Leyte was the place in which the first Catholic Mass happened in the Philippines. However, there were some claims that Butuan was also the place of first Catholic Mass, and it happened somewhere in Masao Island in Butuan. The first Catholic Mass happened on March 31, 1521. That is why, on this coming 2021, the Roman Catholic Church will celebrate its 500 years here in the Philippines. The first Mass was presided by Father Pedro Valderrama. Of course, trial was together with Magellan during their navigation. So now, there are actually two sources that could serve as evidence as to where, when, and how did the Catholic Mass transpired in the Philippines. So the first account was coming from Francisco Albo, and he was a pilot in one of the Magellan ship, and it was Trinidad and Francisco. Albo was also the survivor, one of the 18 survivors who accompanied Sebastian Delcano in going back to Spain, and of course, the second account was coming from Antonio Fagapeta. So Antonio Fagapeta, he was an Italian, a nobleman, an autographer, geographer, who was sent particularly by the King of Spain together with Magellan to document their voyage to the eastern islands. So now, let's take a look at the accounts of Francisco Albo, and it was found one of the citation of Miguel A. Bernard in his book Butuan or Limasawa. The site of the first mass in the Philippines, no re-exclamation of the evidence that it was published in the year 1981. According to Francisco Albo, on the March 16, 1521, as they sailed in a westerly course from Ladrones, they saw land towards the northwest, but owing to many shallow places, they did not approach it. They found later that its name was Yunagan. They went instead the same day southwards to another small island named Suluan. And Suluan, that is Butuan, and they anchored. They saw some cannons, but displayed at the Spaniards' approach. This island was 9 2/3 degree the north latitude. Departing from those islands, they sailed westwards to uninhabited islands of Gada, where they took in the supply of food and water. The sea around that island was free from shallows. Also, Albo does not give the latitude of the islands, but from the Fagapeta's testimony, this seems to be an Aguada or Homonhon at the 10 degree of the north latitude. From that island, they sailed westward towards a large island named Silanay. Silanay, that was in Leyte, or that was Leyte, that was inhabited and that was known as the Have Gold, and Fagapetas called it Ceylon, or that was the island of Leyte. Sailing southwards along the coast of the large island of Silanay, they turned southwards to a small island called Mezava. That island is also a latitude of 9 2/3 degree north. The people of that island of Mezava were very good. There are the Spaniards planted across upon a mountain top, and from there they were shown the islands, 3 islands to the west and southwest. They were told that there were much gold. They showed us how the gold was gathered, which came in small pieces like a peas and lentils. So now, we have to note that Albo didn't mention above the first mass. He mentioned about planting across above the hill. He didn't mention also Limasawa. He neither mentioned about Masao and Butuan. What does that mean? So, however, based on the analysis of the latitude, the location, and the description, Albo's account would fit to location of Limasawa Islands. That's why the southern tip of Leyte. That's why Albo account would actually tell us that it was there in Limasawa, the southern tip of Leyte. So now we're going to the testimony of Antonio Fagapeta in the site of the first mass. The site of the first mass. So, according to Fagapeta, Saturday in the March 16, Saturday in the year 1521, Magellan expedition sighted a high land named Zamal, which was some 300 leagues westward of Ladrones, now the Marianas Islands. On Sunday, March 17, the following day after sighting Zamal Islands, they landed on the another island which was inhabited and which lay to the right of the above-mentioned islands of Zamal. To the right were would mean to the starboard going south of the southwest. There were set up 2 tents for the sick members of the crew and had a soul killed for them. The name of the islands was Humunhon. This island was located at the 10 degree north latitude. On that same day, Sunday, March 17, Magellan named that entire archipelago the island of St. Lazarus. The reason being that it was Sunday in the Lenten season where the gospel assigned for the Mass and the liturgical office was the 11th chapter of St. John, which tells of the raising of the Lazarus from the dead. On Monday, March 18, in the afternoon of their second day on that island, they saw a boat coming towards with them with 9 men in it. An exchange of gifts was effected. Magellan asked for food supplies, and the men went away, promising to bring rice and other supplies in 4 days. So, there were 2 springs of water on the islands of Humunhon. Also, they saw some indications that there were gold in these islands. Consequently, Magellan renamed the islands, and it called as the watering place of good omen, or in their language is Aguada Laday Boni Sinilay or Sinilay. On Friday, March 22, at the noon, the natives returned. This time, they were on 2 boats and they brought food supplies. Magellan expedition stayed 8 days at Humunhon from Sunday, March 17 to the Monday of the following week, March 25. So based on what I have read, this is how we can say that the Filipino natives welcomed the European. So they were offered with foods and other supplies, and we can see in these parts the words amusement of the European about the presence of the gold in the Philippines island. That's why they can say that this is the watering place of good sign, because they can see the sign of golds, and we can also knew that this is what European looking for, right? So on March 25, Monday in the afternoon, Magellan and man left islands of Humunhon and they sailed towards the southwest. That was between 4 islands named Sinalo, Winanghan, Ibusan, and Albari. These were probably as the missing spell of some of places such as Leyte, which is Sinalo, Sinalay, and the Silon, this is Leyte. So now they sailed towards the southern tip of the southwest of Leyte. They left Humunhon sailing southward towards Leyte. They followed the Leyte coast southwards, passing between islands of Himunson on the port side of Hinuangan Bay on the starboard, then continue southward, then turning towards Tudama, Mazawa. So, they landed on the anchored in the islands of Mazawa on the March 28. That was Thursday in the morning, and of the Holy Thursday. They reached in the island called the Mazawa Island and Mazawa Island. They remained 7 days on Mazawa Island. So, based on what I have read, we can say that about the conflicting, because based on the accounts of Albo, he mentioned about Mazava, while Antonio Fegapeta mentioned the name of Masawa. Now, this is the conflicting points of view. After staying for 7 days in Masawa Islands, where the first Catholic Mass happened in Masawa, they left Masawa and they were guided by the king of Masawa. So they went to Cebu or Cebu. And you know that what happened in the Cebu, that Magellan was killed. Now it must be noted that Fegapeta's account gave more details on that 7-day activity on the Masawa Island, and Fegapeta mentioned about how did it happen, how the first Mass happened, and why did it happen, Where did it happen? So basically, they stayed in Limasawa Islands during the Holy Week, because this is the Holy Week. Holy Week is the significance event of the Catholic faith in its memorable event of the Paschal mystery of Christ, in which this is the time of Jueves Santo, Viernes Santo, or a Good Friday, or the Holy Saturday. Then, of course, Easter Sunday. Now, it happened that in March 31, 1521, it was the early Sunday on the huge of celebration. Because of the Catholic, this was the time that was Jesus Christ rose from the dead. So this event was recorded in history of the first Christian ritual that happened in the Philippine Islands. This was the first Catholic Mass that happened in the Eastern Islands, and we have to know that this is the moment for the Catholics. This signifies the birth of Christianity in the Philippines. This signifies the birth of Catholicism in our country. So, according to Fegapetas, on March 31, early in the morning of Sunday, the last of the March and Easter Day, Magellan sent from the priest ashore with some men to prepare for the Mass. Later in the morning, Magellan landed with some 50 men. Mass was celebrated, after which the cross was venerated. So Magellan and the Spaniard returned to the ship for the noonday meal, but in the afternoon they returned ashore to plant cross on the summit of the highest hill. In the attendance of both the Mass and the planting of the cross were the King of the Mazawa and the King of Butuan. So now, this is the arguments of those people. So historians who believe that the Catholic Mass happened in Butuan and somewhere in Masao Islands in Butuan. So the arguments was actually based on the idea that the King of Mazawa, that was Raha Shago, was the brother of Raha Colombo, and the Raha Colombo was the king of Caragua in Butuan. And somehow our point have similarity, and of course the European. So Pegapeta himself mentioned about the abundance of gold, the presence of gold in the place, and you know that Butuan has a lot of gold. So Butuan has a lot of resources of gold. In fact, if we will go to the National Museum of Butuan, there are a lot of presence of artifacts of gold. Let us speak something their history, the riches of their history. So, however, according to Jesuit priest Miguel A. Bernard, in his work Butuan or Limasawa, using the primary source available, the site of the first Mass in the Philippines, reclamation of evidence in 1981 lays down the argument that in the Pegapeta account, a crucial aspect of Butuan was not mentioned. The river. So Butuan is a river settlement. So situated on the Agusan River, the beach of Masao in the delta of Sel River is a curious omission of the account of the river, which make part of the distinct characteristic of Butuan geography that seem to be the important to be missed. So it must also be pointed out that later on, after Magellan death, the survivor of his expedition went to Mindanao, and seemingly they went to Butuan, and in fact, it was the king of Butuan who gave them supply, who gave them food, so they can survive in their navigation and going back to Spain. So now, in this instance, Pegapeta mentioned about the tip of the river. So this is the Butuan. But it is important to notice it has also happened already after the first Mass, and it has happened already after Battle of Mactan. So the question is, where did it happen? So as of now, on July 15, 2020, the National Historical Commission of the Philippine Board of Commissioners signed a resolution number 2 adopted on affirming that the site of the first mass happened in Masawa or Limasawa. That was still based on an argument that those pro-Butuan or those historians proved that the first mass happened in Butuan is lack of the sufficient evidence that it really happened in Butuan. And there was no amendment of the proclamation of the National Historical Institute that is I mentioned earlier. And as of now, the decision of the National Historical Commission of the Philippines is still Limasawa until historians will prove that there is enough evidence that the first Catholic Mass happened in Masao Island somewhere in Butuan. So that is why until now, there is still room for issues. There is still room for a lot of questions. And where does a Catholic Mass really happen? So, and I think this is our task as students, particularly in this topic, to make research to prove our certain claims. So for me, as a student, it doesn't matter either it happened in Limasawa Islands in Leyte or in Masao Islands in Butuan. But for me, as a Catholic or a Christian, it doesn't matter anymore. For me, as of now, what matters is that because of this mass, because of this particular event in our history, then we have Christianity, we have Catholicism, we have faith as a Christians, and because of this event, we Filipino started to know Jesus Christ, and because of this event, Filipinos started to hear the message of the Christianity and the message of the Jesus Christ, the message of gospel, and this is the most significant event. The significance in the particular is the aftermath, and this is now this Christianity that we believe, that we have lived in our lives from that moment and even up to this day. So that's our topic for today, and this is Benji Ayorpo again from Visit Science 2A. I hope you learned something in our discussion for today, and God bless you and more power.